Get yourself ready for the holiday season that's coming up. We've got Thanksgiving around the corner, and then, of course, it's Christmas. I wanted to share with you some wreath ideas to give you some inspiration. Hi there, my name is Sandra, and you're watching The Schwoven's Nest. I've got this grapevine wreath that I picked up at Michael's. I did try to find something at a thrift store, but they just didn't have what I was looking for. What I'm doing here is just taking some burlap ribbon that's fairly wide. I'm going to fold it in half and then just place it all around the back of the wreath. This is going to hang on my daughter-in-law and son's front door, and I don't want it to scratch, so I always put some burlap on it just to make it a little softer. So I've got the burlap all on the back of the wreath, and now I'm going to be using this burlap ribbon, or burlap trim is what they actually call it. And it's from Dollarama, and it comes in a pack, and it's really nice and firm. It's not really soft like you would find normal burlap. And I'm going to be starting to make a bow from this. Here's the inspiration wreath. It's from Pinterest, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's a little different than what you would normally see for a fall wreath, but this is what my client wanted, so that's what I'm going to make for her. I'm going to make this bow really easily. I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm just going to use hot glue to glue all of the pieces together. Then I'm going to make another loop and do the same thing, and then I'll move on to the other type of ribbon. Here's the other piece of ribbon that I'm going to be using. It's this beautiful wired black and burlap buffalo check, and I just love this. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm going to do the same thing with it. I'm going to make a loop and hot glue it. I'm just going to make the loop a touch smaller than the original one. When you're done watching my video, I would appreciate it if you could go and click on that playlist link to see what all the other participants have created too. Now I'm going to assemble the ribbons together, and I'm making an X pattern with the two burlap ones, which are the same size. I'm going to just hot glue them together, and then I'll place the buffalo check on top and glue that one in place as well. I'm going to put the bows onto the wreath in the spot where I think they need to be based on the inspiration piece. And I'm going to use some wire to wire them on. I want to make sure that they're going to stay nice and firmly attached. This is going to be on the front door, and their house has some wind, so I want to make sure that it's going to stay nice and secure. Now I'm going to start adding my florals. I have these two big hydrangeas that came from my stash. I've actually had these for a couple of years now, and I'm just cutting off the edge of it a little bit so I have something to stick and poke right into the wreath itself. I will again take some wire and wire it down, and also use a little bit of hot glue to secure it so it doesn't flop around. This is some eucalyptus that I got at my local Dollarama store. It was $1.25 for each stem. I am going to need to cut that stem down a bit, but it's going to be pushed into the interior of the grapevine wreath, and it will hold really well. What I like to do is put some hot glue on the end before I push it in. And here is where I'm just showing you that I always keep the ends of the stems that I cut off and don't need, because I can always use them for future projects. Again, I'm taking a piece of wire and securing it really well in place. I've repeated the same eucalyptus on the top side of the wreath, which kind of looks a little weird right now because I've got it turned so it can be in the camera. These large leaves are from the hydrangea. I'm going to put a couple underneath each of them just to give more of a filler look. And then I have some other greens that I'll add to it as well. Looking at the inspiration piece as I was working, I noticed that because I'm omitting the white hydrangea, I needed to add a little bit more of the green on either side of the original hydrangea. So I'm taking just 2 or 3 of these blossoms and I'm going to wire them together and then add them in. The wreath is really starting to take shape, so I wanted to also add some of this wheat. This was a Dollar Tree purchase, and each of these bushes was $1.25. I'm in Canada, so we have to pay an extra 25 cents. But I'm not going to use any of the leaves that come with this. So I'm just pulling the leaves off, and I'm going to put the wheat back on just with a little dab of hot glue to hold it in place. Then I'm just going to add the wheat stems in on each side. Try to keep it sort of symmetrical, but I'm not too concerned about it. I just want to make sure that it's full enough and that I like what it looks like. The last piece of greenery that I'm going to add is this lacy looking stuff. I'm not quite sure what it is, but again, I got this at my Dollarama, and I'm just going to cut off some of the pieces and add them in. I really love how this wreath came together, and it only took me about an hour and 15 minutes to do, so not that difficult. I really hope you like it. This wreath is all about the greens. I'm starting off with some ficus leaves and I'm going to trim them down to size. And I'm leaving a long stem so I can just easily tuck that into the side, and then I'll secure it a little bit more with some hot glue. I'm leaving about a 4 or 5 inch gap in between where I'm putting the stems in, and I'm going to repeat that all the way around, going in one direction. Now that I've got all the ficus leaves on the way I like them, I'm going to start with another type of greenery. This one is called boxwood, and it's also a dollar store find. You can see I have a whole whack of greens here, but I'm going to pull out the pointed leaf boxwood to use for this one. I'm repeating the steps as I did with the ficus leaves. I'm trimming down some of the branches, and then I'm going to follow the same pattern that I did with the first leaves and go all the way around in the same direction. On to the third style of greenery. I'm using what's called an asparagus fern, and as you can see, I'm just tucking the stems into the grapevine, and then I will secure it with hot glue. Continue my pattern going all the way around. The last bit that I'm going to add is some eucalyptus that looks like lamb's ear. I'm going to cut these stems and then just place 5 of them in random spots all the way around the wreath. One thing I have to apologize for is the zoom of the camera. This is my new camera. I'm still getting used to it, and this was actually the first project I did with my new camera, and I totally had the zoom off, and so it's really difficult for you to see what I'm doing, but I'm hoping you get the idea. I really liked how the ficus leaves looked, so I wanted to add a little bit more on the inside of the wreath, so I'm just going to be trimming off a few leaves here and there and sticking them in. Here's how it looks hanging on the front door. This is a wreath that I picked up at my local Dollarama. It was $3.50, but what I did to it was take it out to my garage and give it a really good couple of coats of white spray paint. And I'm just going to be doing a winter berry wreath. I wanted this to be really simple and really easy for anyone to do. These berries I also got at Dollarama, and I believe they were $2 a stem. And what I'm doing here is just cutting apart the different pieces of it because I want to fan these around the wreath. I'm going to be taking stems of 3 pieces each and fitting them inside the wreath itself. I'm going to just use hot glue and place them in, and then just double check that they are firmly in place. I ended up using 2 full stems of the berries for this wreath. And now I'm just making sure that all the hot glue has set and these picks won't be falling out. In keeping with the red berry theme, I'm going to be using some of these red matte ornaments that I picked up at Dollar Tree. There's about 20 of them in a pack. I think I'm going to end up using about 8 of them. I don't want any of the gold hanger parts to show, so I'm just going to easily pull those off and just use the ornaments plain without the gold. Using hot glue, I'm going to put a good amount on the top part of the ornament, and then I'm going to be placing it into the greenery and just giving it a bit of a push so it can stick properly. I love the way this wreath is turning out, but I did find that around the ornaments there just needed to be a little bit more embellishment. So what I did was just take 1 stem of the berry garland and just added that to the ornaments all the way around the inside. I've been looking for inspiration to create a winter wreath to hang on my front door, and I found it here on the Wayfair site, but there was no way I was going to pay $92 for a wreath. So off to the thrift store I went. I couldn't believe my luck when I found this twig wreath that has some tulip blooms on it, and it was only $4.99. So I was really excited to find it, and I snatched it up quick. The first thing I did was remove all of the tulip blooms. They were really easy to just pull out. And then I took it into my garage and spray painted it white. I did the front and the back. The Wayfair one was 26 inches wide. Mine is 24. The dollar stores don't have a lot of white available right now. So I did go to Michael's and I found these shiny berries. I found the muted berries in the center, and then I also picked up some Dusty Miller. I was able to use my 50% off coupon on one of the items, so altogether for my supplies I only spent $25. It's always good to plan out what you're doing before you actually do it and before you actually get the glue gun out. So I'm going to take apart these stems so I have smaller pieces to work with. And then using the picture as a guide, I'm going to plan out how I want my wreath to look. One thing that gave me a bit of an issue was these berries that are basically styrofoam. So anytime they came into contact with the hot glue, they started to melt. So I did have to be patient and just hold them in place until the glue was dry. The next type of berries come in little clusters. So I'm going to use clusters of 3 to put them in between the other berries. These are actually wired on, so they were much easier to work with because the wire would just fit in between some of the twig branches, and then I was just able to put a dab of hot glue to hold it in place. This greenery is called Dusty Miller, and it actually is this kind of bluish gray color in real life, and I really like to use that, especially in the springtime as well, with lavender accents. So I'm going to use 2 of those little pieces and glue them towards the center, but again in the same direction as the berries. I had a couple of stems of the original white berries left over, so I decided to just add them more towards the interior of the wreath to cover up a little bit of the wreath form itself.
Then I did the same thing with the leftover shiny berries that I had, and also with the few pieces of Dusty Miller that I had left over.
Here they are side by side, $92 versus $25. I have to say, I think I like mine better. Let me know in the comments which one you like better. During the holiday season, I usually make 2 or 3 wreaths, and I haven't done anything so far. So I thought today's the day. I have this Dollarama wreath for $4. It's got the nice wreath form and then all of the pine branches. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time, fluff it out, and see what it looks like. So here's the wreath all fluffed out, and considering it was only $4, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to be adding some more greenery. This is a cedar branch that I picked up, a huge bush of it at Michael's. Of course, I did use my coupon. And you saw me just bend the ends over, so that way I can hook it onto the original wreath form. But I'm also going to use some additional wire to wire it on, and then some hot glue to hold the wire in place. The wire I'm using is some floral wire, and I also grabbed some of the wire in a 5-pack from the Dollar Tree. That wire is really flexible. It's really super easy to use. You can even tie it in a knot. So if you're looking for some really good wire to use, go ahead and check out the Dollar Tree. I'm going to repeat this process for all 7 pieces of the cedar, and I'm going to make sure that I have it all spaced out evenly. This next one is more of a pine branch. It's really looks beautiful. It's a little bit of a different color too, and it also has some pine cones on it. So I'm going to just trim all of the branches apart and then start attaching them the same way. I had some of these little cedar branches left over, so I'm using some hot glue and I'm going to just stick them in towards the center of the wreath more and on top so there's a little bit of extra texture. I won't need to wire these little pieces because they're going to stick really well to the original wreath. I don't know what that material is called. It's sort of a plasticky, vinyl-y, I don't know what it is, but anyway, it sticks really good. So the hot glue will hold those in place just fine. Now I'm adding some longer needled pine branches, and this is also going to add a lot more texture to the wreath, make it look really great. So what I'm doing is I'm taking it and I'm wiring it to one of the original wreath pieces, and then I'll attach some hot glue. And what I'm making sure I do, because the stem of these are brown, to put it underneath that green stem and you won't see much of the brown. So some of the original pine branches had some pine cones on them, and there were only a few of them, so I wanted to add some extras. I'm taking the pine cones, and at the very bottom I'm just going to wrap some wire all the way around, and then I'm going to twist it a little bit and then use that wire to add the pine cone onto the wreath. I push it down, making sure that the wire is on either side of a really sturdy branch. So whether it's the original wreath form or it's another piece of greenery that has a really thick stem on it, you just want to make sure that whatever you're hanging your pine cone on is going to hold the weight of it. Here I'm using some boxwood greenery, and this isn't something that you would normally find on a wreath, but it is considered an evergreen. I do have some in my garden and they stay green all winter. So I decided that this would be really pretty to add a little bit of different colors, different texture, and just make it stand out a little bit more. You could also use eucalyptus. I think that would be a really pretty branch to use. And I've also seen lamb's ear or like a dusty kind of light green material being used, and that's beautiful as well. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm using my needle nose pliers just to make a little hook on the end of the branch, hook it onto the original wreath, and then wire it down and use hot glue to seal the wire. Now it's time to add some color. I have this berry garland from Dollarama. I'm going to cut the pieces apart. I don't need the holly leaves, so I will be taking those out. They look a little too artificial for me, but I'm going to leave a long stem of wire because that's going to help me to wire and glue the berries right into the wreath. The original cedar branches that I used first actually had some smaller berries, so I'm going to reattach those to where they were supposed to be, and that's going to add some extra colors and extra texture too. I'm also going to be adding these larger berries. Now, they were part of Michael's fall collection, and I got them for 60% off. They're gonna add, again, some more interest, some more texture. They're larger than the red berries, so I think it's just gonna make everything look so high end. I'm really loving the way this wreath is turning out. I'm just using some hot glue for some of these stems, but some of them are going to be wired as well. So for those of you who have been watching my videos, you'll know that I am not a bow person, but this wreath deserves a bow. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I really think that it needs to have something just to finish it off. So because my theme is black and white buffalo check, I've got this ribbon from Michaels, and I'm going to attempt to make a bow. Now I haven't done this for a really long time, but the way I make bows is I use wire to hold it all together. So I've got my two tails here, and that's just a piece of length, probably maybe, 2 feet or so, just so I have something for the tails. I'm going to use this little flexible wire from the Dollar Tree. I love this stuff. I only bought one pack and I've got to go back and get some more. So I'm just going to start winding it around a few times, and then I'll move on to my next piece. Now I'm just cutting lengths off. I'm not measuring, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And what I do with my ribbon is I just fold it in half. And I want the cut pieces to be on the same side, and I overlap them to make sure that they're going to get caught in the wire. I pinch it together, and then I'm going to take it over to the tail and just wind that wire all the way around. I'll repeat this bow process 2 more times. I want to have 3 pieces all together, which will actually make me 6 loops. So 6 loops is good. Sometimes they say you're supposed to have odd numbers, but I'm okay with the 6. And as you can see, it's starting to turn out pretty nice. So I'm just going to keep working with the wire and putting it together. And then at the end, I'm going to fluff it all out. If you're not that great at making bows, then you might want to make sure that any ribbon that you use is wired. That gives you an advantage because you can easily just fluff it out and it's going to stay in place. So what I'm doing now is just kind of pushing the pieces together to hide the wire in the center and just fluffing it, making it nice and fat and filling it up. So you don't need to have tons of loops to make a beautiful bow. You just need to know how to fix it and fluff them up. The last thing I'm going to do to the bow is dovetail the ends. And what that means is making a deep V into them. And what I like to do is start in the center and work my way out so I get a really nice point. I'll do that on both sides. I really love how this bow turned out. It was the perfect size for the wreath, but it just didn't fit. So I ended up making a new bow out of burlap and black buffalo check ribbon, and this one turned out so much better. It looks fantastic on the wreath. Thanks for joining me today. I hope these wreath projects gave you some inspiration to create some for your own home. If you haven't already, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and the like button. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.